Great. Thanks, everyone. Hope you're having a good day. We are having a delightful, sunny, probably cool, but it's probably about 40 plus degrees here Celsius. That's like 10 here today. So not 10, 5. So very nice day overall. So in an ideal world, your family always believes in you. In a real world, that doesn't always work out like that. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Some of you have come from very supportive families. Some of you have come from more difficult families, and some of you are just somewhere in the middle. Maybe you can remember a time when you were hoping that your family would stand behind you and they didn't, and they kind of let you down. Maybe you've never had that experience, and good for you if you haven't. When we talk about the fact that our Savior has experienced all the things that we have. We don't mean in the absolute specifics of our life. Um, we mean, as a general principle, Jesus went through what go through. He was tempted by sin, but he did not sin. He was lied about by people. He was turned against by people. He was, any number of things, fill in the blank. He knows what it was like to be tired. He knows what it was like to be hungry. He knows maybe even what it was like to be sick. It doesn't really tell us of a time ever that he was sick, but being sick is not sinful. So he lived in a fallen, broken world where sometimes things like sickness happened. Maybe he had the common cold. Scriptures just didn't tell us about it. I don't know. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But when it says we have a great high priest that can relate to us because he's walked the path that we've walked, this is what we mean by that. And we're going to look at one of those incidents today in our little series, part two, now called Do You Know Mary? We're going to look at an incident in Jesus' life where maybe his family was concerned for him. They loved him, but they didn't really understand him. And um, they said something very interesting. So let's get to that. Oh, my share button's not working. There we go. I'm going to read the first part of the story, and then I'm going to back up and give you the context. Then Jesus entered a house, and again a crowd gathered, so that he and his disciples were not even able to eat. So apparently, at the end of a day, they probably went to somebody's house. They were going to have a meal, but so many people came that they couldn't even eat. Apparently, at this point in his ministry, this was not unusual. And he's close enough to home that his family heard about it. It says when his family heard about this, they went out to take charge of him and they said he's out of his mind. That's the phrase. I love that. He's out of his mind. I liked how the New American Standard translated. And when his own people or family heard about this, they came out to take custody of him, or in other words, to take responsibility for him. For they were saying he's lost his senses. He, he's he's not in control of himself anymore. We need to go, excuse me, we need to go and do something to take care of him because he's not taking care of himself. So, what is the context that Jesus is that's happening in Jesus' life? Fairly early in his ministry, but still at a place where he became quite popular. He had just done a miracle. It says that it was a man who had a shriveled up hand, and he healed him of that. And then there was a controversy about it because he did it on the Sabbath, and the religious leaders thought that was something that he shouldn't do on the Sabbath. Jesus did it purposely on Sabbath to challenge them, but that's a different lesson for another day. It says that Jesus, I'm going to read for you now what happened. And Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the lake, and a large crowd from Galilee followed him. And when they heard about all that he was doing, many people came to him from Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, and the regions across the Jordan, and around Tyre and Sidon. We're talking a huge crowd of people have all come to look for him, and they all want something from him. If you've ever served in some kind of a public office or whatever, you know what it's like, how the public they think in terms of their own little bubble. And I'm not criticizing that. They don't realize how there's a gazillion bubbles out there, and all those bubbles are talking to you and asking you to do something, asking something from you. This is what was happening. They came from all over. And because of the crowd, he told his disciples to have a small boat ready for him to keep the people from crowding him. Like he couldn't even do anything, excuse me, he couldn't do anything because of the crowding people. For he had healed many, so that those with diseases were pushing forward to touch him. These are desperate people. There's compared to today, there's very little in the sense of medical care. And so when you have a miracle worker and whatever limited amount of medicine was available in the day wasn't helping, of course you would want to see Jesus and to be healed by him. So they were pushing and shoving. I, it reminds me of a time when I was flying back from Beirut, I think with Andrew, no, it was with Don, and we got delayed at the airport in Beirut for 5 hours. And when the pilot finally came out to explain why we were delayed while we're in the waiting room, the people, all the people around me got up and they rushed forward right to that pilot, and they were all demanding things from him. And that was just a small little crowd, but it gave me a picture of what Jesus was going through. For he healed many, so that those with diseases were pushing forward to touch him. And whenever impure spirits saw him, they fell down before him and cried out, "You are the Son of God." But he gave them strict orders not to tell others about him. And he went up on a mountainside and he called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. This is when he's training the 12. He spent some time alone. He had to actually go up on a mountain, probably snuck off with the 12, did some training, and now they've come back down. They want to just have a meal, but the crowd is pressing in so hard that it can't happen. Now, I told you this is a series about Mary. Where is Mary in all of this? Well, this is verses 20 and 21 that we read. Mark puts a story in the middle of this story about some Pharisees and some conflict that Jesus had. We don't necessarily need to look at that. They actually accused him of being of Satan. Uh, the reason it's there is to show how so many people did not understand who Jesus was. It says, then Jesus' mother and brothers arrived. So earlier it said his family heard about it. They went. They were on their way to take charge of him. Now they've arrived, and there's Mary and the brothers. She's part of the ones who said he lost his senses. Even his own family didn't understand him. And standing outside, they sent someone in to call him. They couldn't even get in the house to try to get him. And the crowd was sitting around him, and they told him, your mother and brothers are outside looking for you. And Jesus says the most interesting thing. Well, who are my mother and brothers? He asked. And then he looked at those in a circle around him and said, here's my mother and brothers. Whoever does the will or does God's will is my brother and sister and mother. Now, let's be clear what's not going on there. Jesus is not rejecting his mother and his family. Jesus is God himself. The same God is the one who talked frequently about the importance of family. God is the one who set up family as the basic core building block of any society, any culture, any community. We need strong families to have strong community. God did not suddenly change that principle right here. Jesus is not saying, I'm rejecting her. I don't like what she said. That's not what's happening. This same Jesus, the same Jesus that on the cross, he looked down from the cross, and we're going to look at that story in a couple days. And he looked at John. He said, John, here's my mother. I want you to take her as your mother. And mom, here is your son now, John. Treat him as your son. He's going to care for you. The same Jesus actually cared deeply for his family and for his mother. What he is saying is that in the priority of relationships, those who do the will of God are part of God's family. There's a closeness of relationship that will happen when you and I, by faith, are obedient to God. And so that's the lesson today. As important as Mary was to Jesus, it was even more important that people understand the importance of faith and obedience to him. So that's our lesson for today. I hope that encourages your heart as you walk with the Lord. Seek him, uh, pray to him, obey him, follow him, and God will bless you. And that's my encouragement for today. Lord willing, I look forward to seeing you all on Wednesday.